You've just joined the Prepper Broadcasting Network, where we promote self-reliance and independence. The views and opinions expressed are strictly those of the host or their guests. Visit us in the interactive chat room at PrepperBroadcasting.com.
Are you storing food? Prepared families are storing food for months and years, but only have enough fuel stored for days or weeks. Stretch your fuel storage by harnessing the power of the sun with the Sun Oven. Foods can be baked, boiled, or steamed at temperatures of 360 to 400 degrees with the power of the sun. You can use the sun for 50 to 80% of your cooking, allowing you to preserve your fuel storage for rainy days. Sun-baked foods stay moister and have less shrinkage and do not burn. Sun-baked roasts are tastier and more succulent, and sun-baked bread has unparalleled taste and texture. Water can be heated in the Sun Oven for purification or personal hygiene. For the past 26 years, Sun Ovens have been proudly made in the USA. They are durable, have a long life, and come with a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Don't be fooled by cheap imitations. For a discount coupon, visit sunoven.com/PreppersRadio. That's www.sunoven.com/PreppersRadio. This broadcast is brought to you in part by Ozark Mountain Preparedness, providing top-quality instructional courses for people who desire to pursue a self-reliant lifestyle, whether in the wilds or right at home. Course topics include wilderness and urban survival, fur trapping, bushcraft, primitive skills, long-term wilderness living, land navigation, GPS, home disaster preparation, outdoor cooking, food procurement and storage, foraging wild edibles, and many others. Visit Ozark Mountain Preparedness at www.ozarkmountainpreparedness.com.
Good evening and welcome to Preparing for Life Storms with BexarPrepper. Today is Tuesday, August 21st, 2012, and it's my pleasure to welcome you in tonight. We are on air from 8 to 9 p.m. Central Time, the first and third Tuesday of the month on American Preppers Radio, powered by PrepperBroadcasting.com. We broadcast 12 different hosts 7 days a week. Tomorrow night, Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central, The Lost Art of Prepping with Malay Bostic. Physical aspects of prepping and self-reliance. He will go into depth on how physical surviving can be and how much work and effort you will exert and the ways of being ready for such a demand. Then, at 8 p.m. Central Time, it's Prepping with Goat Hollow. He'll be discussing the virtues of homesteading versus prepping. He'll roundtable with callers on where the best location is for your prepping homestead. Now on to tonight's discussion. First, let's go ahead and start with a basic understanding about drying foods. Drying is a method of food preservation that works by removing water from the food, which inhibits the growth of microorganisms. Open-air drying using sun and wind has been practiced since ancient times to preserve foods. Archaeological discoveries indicate that early man sustained himself on natural, dehydrated foods and later used heat from the sun or their fires to preserve food harvested during seasons of plenty. Dried foods were found in the pyramids and other burial tombs, and centuries later, some of it was still in a state of preservation. The Vikings carried dry food on their sea voyages. Dried foods have been stored on board ships throughout the world since ancient days. Even the Pilgrims found the American Indians drying food. Pioneers used dried beef jerky and other dried foods as staples on their journey across the country. Most recently, astronauts who landed on the moon enjoyed desserts of dried fruit. A solar or electric food dehydrator can greatly speed the drying process and ensure more consistent results. Water is usually removed by evaporation, air drying, sun drying, smoking, or wind drying. But in the case of freeze drying, food is first frozen and then the water is removed. Bacteria, yeast, and molds need the water in the foods to grow, and drying effectively prevents them from surviving in the food. That does not, however, prevent fats and oils in the food from going rancid. Many different foods are prepared by dehydration. Good examples are meats such as prosciutto and beef jerky. You can also salt and dry meats. First, the meat is soaked, pickled in salt water for a couple of days to guarantee the conservation of the meat. Then the meat is dried in the sun in spring when the air temperature is below zero. Fruits, however, change characteristic completely when dried. The plum becomes the prune, the grape the raisin. Figs and dates are also transformed into new different products, which can be eaten as they are or can be rehydrated. Chilies can be dried. Home drying of vegetables and fruits and even meat can be carried out in a home employing sun drying or using electrical dehydrators. Preservatives such as potassium, here I go with a big word, metabisulfite or BHA, BHT for meat may be used. These preservatives are not required. However, dried products without these preservatives may require refrigeration or freezing to ensure long periods of storage. Freeze-dried vegetables are often found in backpackers' foods, hunters' foods, and military. The exception to this rule is bulbs such as garlic and onions, which are often dried. Edible mushrooms as well as other fungi are also sometimes dried for preservation purposes or to affect the potency of chemical components, or they can be used as seasonings. I invite you to call into the show at 347-202-0228. Remember, when prompted, press 1 to speak to me. As I stated before, in ancient times, the sun and wind would have naturally dried foods. Evidence shows that Middle East and Oriental cultures actively dried foods as early as 12,000 BC in the hot sun. Later, cultures left more evidence, and each would have methods and materials to reflect their food supply. Fish, wild game, domestic animals. I wonder what they mean by domestic animals. I guess in some cultures, yeah, that would be dog and cat. Vegetables and fruits were also dried from the earliest times. The Romans were particularly fond of any dried fruit they could make. In the Middle Ages, purposely built still houses were made to dry fruits, vegetables, and herbs in areas where there wasn't enough strong sunlight for drying. A fire was used to create the heat needed to dry foods, and in some cases, smoking them as well. The earliest curing was actually dehydration. Early cultures used salt to help desiccate foods. Salting was common and even culinary by choosing raw salts from different sources: rock salt, sea salt, spice salt, Himalayan pink salt. In the 1800s, it was discovered that certain sources of salt gave meat a red color instead of the usual unappetizing gray. Consumers overwhelmingly preferred the red-colored meat. In this mixture of salts were nitrites, saltpeter. As the microbiology of Clostridium botulinum was discovered in the 1920s, it was realized that nitrite inhibits this organism. In the Depression era, they used bird guano. I wonder how many of us knew that. Bird guano has saltpeter in it. Wow. It's a natural source of nitrogen needed to make bacon and sausage safe. So back then, they would put bird guano in their meat to preserve it. I'm sorry, I don't want to eat no bird guano. But you can, however, order Morton's Meat Cure at their online store or go to theingredientstore.com. If you can't find potassium nitrate, now there's nitrite and nitrate. And nitrate causes a chemical reaction to release nitrites. So they both effectively do the same thing. Now, like in the Morton Salt Cure, you're going to have nitrates and nitrites because they found that it actually does a better job and gives you a better quality of food preservation for your meats if you combine the two. However, companies are now getting rid of the nitrates, and they're strictly going to use the nitrites. I think that's more of a cost-effective reason than a better-for-us reason, because anything that, you know, the economy can save, then the economy is going to save. So dehydration only minimally affects the nutritional value of food. I get a lot of questions about this. You know, what's better for you, canning or dehydrating? So let's go over a few aspects of what happens. When you're doing this in your own home, you actually end up with a better product. The nutritional value of dried foods is better when under certain conditions. So like correct temperature, a reasonable amount of drying time, you produce a better quality product. And it has been proven that preserving them at home, the home dehydrator person actually does a better job than the store dehydration process. So if you can do your own, do your own. And if you compare it with canning and freezing, both which involve extreme temperatures, food drying is the least damaging and the best for you. From what I read and understand, you've got about a 40% nutritional loss on canning due to the heat. Now, mind you, we cook all our vegetables, we cook all our meat anyway, so you're going to lose that nutritional value or pretty close to it regardless. But when you dehydrate, you actually stop the enzymes by blanching, and so you maintain those nutritional values. For example, vitamin A is retained during the drying process. Well, before I go into that, let's go ahead and see what French Princess wants to ask us about. French Princess, are you here?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, how are you doing this evening, hon?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
What can I do for you tonight?
I have a question about dehydration. I myself don't own a dehydrator. My mom has an Excalibur, so growing up I was able to use that, and she would do all kinds of stuff and kind of got spoiled by it. She let me borrow it for a little bit, but now she took it back. So I don't know that I really can feel right spending on a tight budget $60 or $100 on a new dehydrator. I'm not able to find any used around here where I'm at because I think everybody's holding on to what they've got for the most part. And I just was wondering if anybody calls in after me or you or anyone has any info on oven dehydrating, because it is still pretty humid where I'm at. I can't really do it outside very well. And my oven only goes down to 175. Okay,
so what you could do, and it would probably work pretty good, is go ahead and put your oven on 175, put your dehydrated foods, the foods you want to dehydrate, in the oven, only leave the oven on for 20 to 30 minutes, and then shut it off with the oven light still on, and put your rack at the very top.
Okay,
and then if you find after about
rack?
It should be on something. You want the air to be able to circulate so that because if you don't, you're not going to dry it very quickly. Now, parchment paper breathes, or cheesecloth, or anything like that can breathe, it'll dehydrate quicker. But you might find that 175 in your oven, if you put it on the top rack and take a little stick and crack the door, it'll drop that temperature down just enough that it'll be fine. And you could dry it much quicker, but you're going to have heat loss from the oven. That's why I usually do the light. Or you can also, in the heat of the summer, you can put it on trays and put it in your car. If you have a solar oven, you can dehydrate in your solar oven.
Okay.
If you have a shed, that gets hot, it's a great place to dehydrate also if you can keep the bugs off.
Okay.
Does that help at all?
Yeah, it does. It does. I also, this is kind of weird, but maybe it's not. Maybe other preppers have done something similar. But my mom had one of those round ones. I don't know what brand it was, but with the trays, and I really have no idea what brand it is, so it's not like I could get a new one, but I just have the trays from one of the ones that she had that died. And I kept them thinking maybe I could figure out how to rig up an air dryer or something. I've seen people do it with box fans. I don't know if anybody calls in after me, if anybody has tried to make something with dehydrator trays or with a box fan. I've seen people do jerky on box fans, and I don't know about that with no heat, but just throwing that out there.
Well, and like I was reading in the beginning, in the ancient times, they didn't necessarily deal with heat. It was called wind drying. So that is also possible. You don't have to necessarily have heat to dry. Wind drying was a viable option. It's just not something that we do. We combine the wind drying with the heat drying nowadays. But that is a good idea. I'm sure if you go on YouTube, I guarantee you will find a video on using those trays, unless someone here has made one. But I'm sure you'll find one there.
Okay. I'll definitely check.
All right, great. Anything else I can answer for you?
One thing that is dehydrating potatoes. I don't want to. I have these potatoes and I would like to do them, but I'm scared that they're going to be rock hard when I rehydrate them. Had I think bad experience with them before, and I don't want waste. Right now I'm kind of stretched tight. Sorry, my daughter's trying to talk on the phone too.
Oh, that's okay. We love little kids.
So basically just that, potatoes. Them being a very dense food, I guess I'm concerned about them rehydrating well.
Well, they actually, if you can dehydrate them, they actually rehydrate quite well. As you probably know, I was a failure with potatoes up until this year. I had several fellow YouTubers teach me how to do it, and I actually, for the first time, succeeded in not getting black potatoes. So I'm real good at black potatoes. But you know how I rehydrate my potatoes, and it's the only way I've found that they actually rehydrate completely, is the day before I put them in a mason jar and fill the mason jar with water. Then I just stick it in my fridge, and I plan on cooking them the next night. And they are completely rehydrated then.
Awesome.
So give that a shot and see if that works for you. Okay?
All right. Yeah, thank you so much, Bear.
You're welcome, hon. You have a great evening.
You too. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Okay, folks, don't forget the call-in number is 347-202-0228. And I'm going to go ahead and read on because I wrote all this down earlier, and I'm just going to say it. Vitamin A is retained during the drying process because vitamin A is light-sensitive. It's very important that you put it in a dark place. And items with vitamin A are carrots, bell peppers, mangoes, those kind of foods. Some vitamin C is lost during the drying process because vitamin C is air-soluble. And when you dehydrate, you slice things thin, and so the cells are cut. The surfaces that are exposed to the air will lose some vitamin C because of that. The caloric value of fresh food stays the same when it's dried, although some dried foods, fruits for example, taste sweeter because the water has been removed and the sugar is concentrated. Dried fruits and vegetables are high in fiber and carbohydrates, neither of which is affected by drying. Dried fruits and vegetables are naturally low in fat, minerals available in certain fresh fruits, such as potassium, sodium, magnesium, and so on, are not altered when the fruit is dried. So now there are three categories of foods for dehydrating. You have your meat and fish, your fruits and vegetables, and your herbs, and they all require different temperatures. So meat and fish is usually 145 degrees or above. Fruits and vegetables are normally 130 to 140 degrees, and herbs and flowers are usually 95 to 110 degrees. In an article by Dawn R. Cole, she says, dehydrating food dates back to biblical times when it was a dire necessity and not a culinary delicacy. Modern methods of preserving food through refrigeration, freezing, canning, pasteurizing, and chemical additives almost made the ancient practice of dehydration extinct until recently, when dehydrating food is now enjoyed a much-deserved resurgence. I wonder why that is. We all know, don't we? Even with all our food storage technology, dehydration remains one of the most nutritious, safe, and economical and flavor-saving methods of food preservation. Many fresh fruits and vegetables cannot be frozen successfully. Dehydrated fruits and vegetables are safe from spoilage, require a small investment of time and money, and can be easily stored. Meats can be dehydrated safely, although their shelf life is greatly reduced over the vegetables and fruits. So now let's talk about dehydrating, how to do it. We got someone in the queue, CJ. So let's go ahead and get CJ in here before I start yakking some more. CJ, come on in.
Hi.
Hi, CJ. How are you this evening?
Good.
Wonderful. What can I do for you tonight?
Well, I have to say I love my dehydrator. We've been having a great time with it. We've been doing all kinds of stuff. And I mentioned on the chat that we like it so much, my husband's looking at building a solar dehydrator.
Nice.
And wondering how would we control the temperature of something like that?
Well, you're going to have to, one of the things I found with the solar oven dehydrator is you're going to have some way of having a bellow that will adjust to the heat and release, so something controlled on the temperature gauge. And I've been trying to think what could work for that, because it's almost like you need a thermostat in there. You know, if it gets too hot, your product is still good. You can't over dry anything, but you can crisp it. Like I did my cabbage. My cabbage got crisp, which I love, but I wouldn't want everything to be that way. So you need something that you can open like a vent. You know, kind of like something you'd use in your attic. You know how when it gets too hot it kicks on?
Yeah.
Maybe something like that, like a solar attic fan. Get a really cheap one that has a thermostat that you can set at, 140 degrees, and if it reaches 140 degrees, kick on.
Okay, that's an idea.
But you'd be building a big one.
Yeah, we are going
right?
to. We've been looking at different YouTube videos, and there's a guy over in England who did them with soda cans, and we really like that idea. And we're saving up soda cans to do that. We don't drink soda, but so we've been kind of collecting them from people. But then now we also noticed that they have beer in really big cans, and so my husband thought he'd make two, one that lets a lot of air through fast and one that slows down the air, and then do some type of venting, because we don't know if we're going to have enough money to get too far into solar, so we want to be able to control temperatures
Right. And
manually.
You make a good point there, the larger cans allowing more airflow through, which means you would want to do items that took lower temperatures.
Right. Like if I want to do my herbs, I don't want them at too high of a temperature, So that's...
Well, why build two? Why not just build a removable panel that you can switch out your can sheet with?
That's what he's going to do.
It'll be
nice. Two separate panels, one, so that they can both do it. And I did learn something about dehydrating parsley.
Okay.
Don't wash it first.
No. Never wash herbs first, really.
It took 2.5 days.
Yeah.
Not
and,
good.
a lot of times they'll turn black on you.
They didn't, but it did take a long, long time.
Yeah, I find that with my basil, if I wash it, they're black within, we've got black spots all over them within like 4 hours, and it's like, oh, this is the ugliest basil.
Yeah, so that parsley was the first herb I did, so I kind of learned my lesson on that. Now, if I want to store, like, the parsley for a long time, for long-term storage, with herbs, do we put an oxygen absorber in if we're going to vacuum seal?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Because herbs, you don't want the light, okay? And if you're going to store for a long period of time, a vacuum seal bag is not going to do it. It's just not. Vacuum seal bags are not airproof. So, and a better solution, if you don't have Mylar, would be to blacken your mason jars and put an O2 absorber in there and use them as is.
Okay, so I'll use my Mylar. All right. And one other question, canned pineapples, we have to let them get totally dry, correct? I mean,
otherwise you can't store them, right.
Yeah, I bought dried pineapples, for in the store, but they're not really dry. They're
you know what I
chewy.
do with mine? Pineapple, normally what I'll do is I'll buy the store pineapple because I hate cutting up pineapple and I don't grow pineapple. But then I re-dehydrate it is what I do. I take the rest of the moisture out of it. Same with raisins, same with coconut. Always re-dehydrate them if you're going to store them for a long period of time. Otherwise, you're going to open it up and you're going to have a bag full of mold.
Okay, well, all I got to do is keep my daughter out of the pineapples long enough. All right, well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, CJ. You have a wonderful evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, folks, the call-in number is 347-202-0228, and we have an empty queue. So let's how do we dehydrate? What are the processes? Most vegetables, you require blanching or semi-cooking in some way, shape, or form. And there are many ways to do it. You can blanch in a pot of water. I prefer not to because you're dunking all this stuff in a pot of water and you're leaching some of those nutrients out into that water. Now, if you're going to make soup later in the day, then that water is great for that. But I prefer to do it in the microwave. I know microwaves aren't that good for you, but I'm only putting it in there for 2 minutes on each side, and it's a big stuffed gallon bag. And I just put a tablespoon of water in there, close the bag 3/4 of the way, and start blanching it. And then I toss it on the tray and let it dry. Things like cabbage, and the reason you do it is if you don't do it, your veggies won't rehydrate completely. They'll rehydrate, but they're still going to be tough. When you blanch them, you break down that exterior shell, the enzymes in it, and it allows it to absorb the water much easier when you rehydrate. Fruits, you got to remember to do apples and bananas and things like that with lemon. I love the way Dehydrate the store showed to do it and just do a spritz. You just screw on one of those spray bottles on top of your lemon juice and just spritz it. But you got to be careful because you will get a lemon flavor, especially on bananas. I prefer to either buy my dehydrated bananas so they aren't brown or I dip them in honey. Everybody has their preferences, why aren't microwaves bad? Well, microwaves are bad. They're bad for you, supposedly, but I think everything in our life is bad for us nowadays. You know, at some point, eggs were bad for us, butter was bad for us. You know, there's degrees of badness, I guess, and you have to decide what's best for you. You know, don't do what I do, because that's what's best for me, and what's best for you may be slightly different. But it's really important to store dehydrated food. One of my philosophies is that you should have 75% dehydrated and the rest in alternate forms, because dehydrated food weighs less, it takes less room, and it stores a whole lot longer with a great quality of product than any other method. And the best part, you can take those little bits of items, you know, a can of peas, well, maybe not a can of peas, a bag of peas, and you can throw them on the dehydrator. You can go outside and harvest 15 pea pods and throw them on the dehydrator. You don't have to do large quantities. And the way I do it, I just throw it in a mason jar until I get enough. And usually it takes 4 mason jars to fill up a 1-gallon Mylar bag. And then I O2 it and seal it up. So, looks like we've got Genius in Exile in the queue. Hey, G.
Hey, Bear. How are you?
Good. How are you doing this night?
Oh, doing pretty good. Just listening to the show. Wanted to pipe in.
Well, what can I help you with tonight, or what information you're going to pass on to us?
Well, actually, I just kind of wanted to talk about the difference between freeze-dried, dehydrating, and what's best to do yourself for cost efficiency, and what's best to just go ahead and buy because of the amount of time, energy, and cost it would go into. It would be better to buy or to do yourself.
Oh, that's a great subject, because I think a lot of people get hung up on that one. You know, they think it's everything you just got to do yourself, but you're right. There are things that it's just not cost effective to do. And what kind of things were you thinking about?
Well, let's see. Coming from a conversation I had with a favorite prepper pal of mine talking about green peppers, how, you know, if you're dehydrating them, they come out, you know, one way nice and hard. And if they're freeze-dried, they kind of turn into styrofoam after a while, they've been opened. So just kind of basically touching on vegetables and fruits, what would be better to buy versus doing your own as far as quality and price.
Well, you're absolutely right on the freeze-dried. One of the things people don't realize is a number 10 can of freeze-dried anything is the equivalent of the original product. So if you've got a can of freeze-dried ground beef, and it's probably about 10 cups in there, that's all the ground beef you get is 10 cups. Green peppers, if it's got 10 cups in it, then that's all you get is 10 cups. Whereas with dehydrated, it's about 1/4 to 1/8 the amount. So that 10 cups equates to 40 cups or 80 cups or whatever. You know, there's a whole lot more. And so I know freeze-dried is convenient. It rehydrates really quickly. It's just all this. It's really expensive. It is not cost-effective at all. And it's not necessarily better. Plus, once you open the can, you've got maybe a year before that stuff tastes like styrofoam. It's just really bad after a year, just really, really bad. So you've got to use it up rather quickly. And because the cans are small, you can usually do that for the most part. I've had a loss of green peppers and peas because we're just not a pea family. And green peppers, you know, that's a lot of green peppers to use when they're itty-bitty little green peppers. So you got to think about that kind of thing when you're deciding what to dehydrate. You know, cabbage. I don't dehydrate most of my cabbage. If I'm growing some, I'll dehydrate it, but I buy in bulk. You know, I'll buy a 15, 25-pound bag of dehydrated cabbage for, you know, $60, $70. Or I'll go get mushrooms, a 15-pound bag of mushrooms that are already dehydrated. I don't buy the small quantities. I buy the large quantities because that's where your cost savings is. and then I Mylar it up.
Mhm. Oh, so it sounds like a good idea to kind of do a cost comparison as far as doing it yourself and then buying it ready-made, and from there, make your meals out of it, either pre-prepare them or just Mylar them up. That's a good idea.
Yeah, and if you don't use something a lot, then it's probably better for you to just dehydrate it yourself. And if you use it a whole lot, how many heads of cabbage do you want to do? I probably eat about 50 heads of cabbage a year because I just love cabbage. And I prefer dehydrated cabbage to fresh cabbage. So it's the texture is just much nicer and the flavor is really intense. Same with mushrooms. You get a really intense mushroom flavor. They're just to die for.
I noticed that when I did my meatballs with the dehydrated mushrooms, it was just a better flavor.
Yeah, and then have you tried grinding your dehydrated mushrooms up and using them? Oh, my goodness gracious.
Oh, yeah. I did that in some tomato powder that I did with some peppers and other things. I'll just add a couple spoons of that to my marinara, and it tastes really great.
Nice. Yeah, and someone in the chat room is talking about tomato powder. If you have a bumper crop of tomatoes, sure, dehydrate them and grind those bad boys up.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else I can answer for you, hon?
Nope, that was perfect. Thank you, Bear.
Well, thank you for contributing, and thank you for your ideas, and you have a wonderful evening.
You too. Thank you.
All right, folks, let's see. What's the best way to dehydrate tomatoes? Slice them and then dry them. And then you can grind them up, cube them, rip them apart, however you want to do. You can also chop them. They're going to stick together a whole lot easier than the sliced ones, and so you got to keep that in mind. But if you're going to grind them up into powder, it doesn't really matter. The little cubes will dry much quicker, and then you can just grind them up. But make sure they're dry. One of the things that people forget is when your dehydrator is going and you touch them and you think, oh, they're hard, they're ready, or some items are real soft and you don't think they're ready, you've got to turn your dehydrator off and let things cool down for 10, 15 minutes and then check them again. Another great thing to do if you're not used to dehydrating is put them in a Ziploc bag for a week with the air out and see what happens. You'll know within a week if they aren't dry enough. Remember, you can never over-dry them. You can cook some things, but you can't over-dry them. And usually the cooking is because you're on the wrong temp. Take your temperature down a little bit. If you have a round dehydrator, very important to move the trays around. Take the top one, put it in the middle one to the top. You've got to do that with a round one. And you've also got to, a lot of times, flip the food over. They don't dry evenly like, say, an Excalibur would. So you've got to keep those things in mind. A round dehydrator, I used one for 22 years. Never had a problem with it. I just had to spend a little more time manipulating it. I love my Excalibur, and the main reason is I put it in, I forget it. I set it up, I let it go overnight, I turn it off before I go to work. When I get home from work, I turn it back on for 30 minutes to get the humidity out of the product, and then I pull them out and bag them. So it really is a convenience thing, but is the convenience worth the price? You have to decide what's best for you. All right, looks like we've got Cabby's wife in queue. Hey, Cabby's wife, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, and I'm fabulous. I have a question for you.
Okay.
Okay. One of our fabulous chat room moms here, one of our ladies, has told me that she would love to float me a dehydrator, and that automatically put my wheels to turning. What with grocery prices growing and growing and getting higher. The husband and I went to H-E-B last month, and we got a whole lot of meat. And then we went at the beginning of this month and got a whole lot of meat. And I don't eat red meat anymore. We only eat turkey meat. So my question is, if we take ground turkey meat and we cook it the way you would cook ground beef, can you then put it in the dehydrator and, like, dry it out and then just later, like, throw it in with, like, some chicken broth and, you know, make a meal out of it? Or is it like a different, more, you know, heinous process?
Okay. I do not dehydrate meat, and only because there are certain precautions you need to take. You got to be concerned with the fat content. They rehydrate really difficultly. There are a lot of people who do it successfully, and the key to doing it successfully is no fats. Can't have fats in dehydrated meat, because what happens is those fats will go rancid because they are exposed. All the fats will rise to the surface of it, and you may think you're wiping them off, but you're going to have those fats. You know, I do jerky, and my jerky will last a year and a month, but I use lean meat, and I really get the grease off of it. But it'll still go rancid unless I refrigerate it. So I really don't want to offer advice on dehydrating meat, but yes, you can find those answers on YouTube, and yes, that is the correct process. But be aware that you're going to have to rehydrate in a different way in order to get it to come back to its fullness, say in a soup or in a jar with water overnight or something like that. You know, it is a valid process. I just choose not to do it and choose not to help others do that, only because of safety reasons.
All right. Well, then you answered my question. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, hon, and you have a great evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, looks like we got Mom and 8 kids in queue. Mom with 8 kids in queue. Oh, my goodness. What are you still doing up tonight?
Hey, Bear.
How are you doing, hon?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. How are those babies?
Oh, they're great. They're great. Listen,
Wonderful.
You talked about having a source for bulk dehydrated foods, but you didn't share it. Can you share that with us?
Well, I actually could not find it. I got to go through my receipts and find which site I got it from.
Oh. Okay.
I know one of them was the Spice Barn.
Uh-huh.
I think it was the Spice Barn where I got it from.
Yeah.
And another one is Bulk Foods.
Bulk Foods,
but,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the one that I found, the mushrooms and cabbage, though, was I don't remember, and I've got to find it. But what I'll do is when I do the follow-up on Preparing for Life Storm's YouTube channel, I'll post those links there.
Oh, great. Okay. Good.
Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, because I couldn't find it. My computer was broke all day, and I was, you know, sometimes we wait till the last minute to get things ready.
Oh, you do that too, huh? Okay.
Yeah, and it backfired big time on me tonight.
Okay. Well, I got one more question for you.
Sure.
You know, the latest craze among many YouTube preppers seems to be this meal in a jar recipes, but they use the freeze-dried foods. Do you think that that's doable with the dehydrated foods?
It is. The way I do it is, I'll be honest with you, I don't put it in a jar. To me, that's the waste. It's not a cost-effective way, and I'm on a budget.
Yeah.
So what I do is I'll take a recipe, and I will Okay, I'll make one batch. So I'll see, okay, how many, quarter cups of cabbage do I need, or mushrooms, or whatever that is. And once I find that out, then I will go ahead and open 1 can of everything. I'll measure it out. I'll put it in a vacuum bag, and then those vacuum bags and put them in a Mylar bag. And then I my recipe, because now I know how much I need in each can to use that. And I dehydrate. Okay. What it is. I do not use the dehydrated or freeze-dried meat I don't like to store them already made up soups because everything stores better in bigger packages. You know, like items together, you don't have to worry about one item contaminating another item and that kind of thing. But for convenience sake, it is really nice to have those jars or vacuum seal bags with your foods in it. You can just open it. And, but freeze-dried, oh, my gosh. Yeah. Do you know how expensive that stuff is?
Expensive, yeah.
I mean, in the beginning, we all make that mistake. In the beginning, I bought freeze-dried. Yeah. And, you know, it's $48 for 10 cups of hamburger. Right. Am I stupid?
Right.
You know, that's just crazy. Right. It's just crazy.
And then what about the actual cooking? I mean, is the cooking affected? It seems to me that the dehydrated food would take longer, you know, than the freeze-dried to rehydrate.
Well, when you're combining, if you're going to mix dehydrated with freeze-dried, you're going to have to adjust when you're putting something in. Yeah. Now, if you're doing all dehydrated, you know, like I said, what I do is I'll take my half-gallon mason jar, I'll put all my ingredients in there, pour my water in, stick it in the fridge over the night. Yeah. Next morning, put it in my crock pot.
Yeah, so just think ahead. Okay.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, if you put freeze-dried peas in with dehydrated celery, you're either going to have some crunchy celery or some soggy peas. One of the two.
Yeah. All right, sounds good. Well, thanks for your expertise there, Bear.
Well, thank you, Mom. Have a great evening.
Okay, you too. Bye.
All right, bye-bye. Okay, I got a question from CJ. What should we put on dehydrator trays for tomatoes, or should we use fruit roll trays? Yeah, tomatoes are a mess, aren't they? They tend to stick everywhere. You know, those plastic canvas sheets actually do pretty good with tomatoes. They stick, but they peel right off. Those plastic round American Harvest trays, it's just a nightmare. What you can do is you can use parchment paper, you can use saran wrap, you can use fruit roll trays. You're going to have to rotate them. You're going to have to flip every tomato over and dry it on the opposite side. But if you've ever had to try to clean those trays from stuck tomatoes, it's well worth the effort. All right, looks like we've got a question from Cassamom. Can you dry tomato paste from the store and grind it into powder? Yes, Cassamom, you can. I do it all the time because which one of us can use that whole can of tomato paste? Normally, it's like, okay, I need a tablespoon. You mean I got to open up that whole thing for a tablespoon? Slap it on your fruit roll-up tray or your saran wrap and dehydrate. Now, before you put it in your little chopper, break it up as much as you can. Otherwise, the blade is going to stick to it, and it's just going to spin around in circles. All right, wheat tree. Would our conditions down here in Texas cause problems in dehydrated food? You have to be real careful. Once you turn your dehydrator off, within 15, 20 minutes, you need to get it in a bag of some sort. Otherwise, just put it back on the dehydrator, heat it up again, and go for the second time. I actually put mine in Mylar or vacuum seal bags when they're still slightly warm. So, because, our humidity, or any place you have a lot of humidity, you got to be real careful. And for some places that have really high humidity, they have to be careful what season they dehydrate so that they actually get a product that's not going to mold on them. Okay. Sounds like I'm cutting in and out. So I apologize. Maybe if I talk a little slower. Can you hear me in there, guys? I'm not seeing any. I can hear you. I'm only hearing Bear. That's all you should be hearing, Mom. Okay. So, dehydrating, like I said, is probably one of the most cost-effective ways to go. Now, I am so off of time. Let me get into some of this business I need to take care of. Let's see here. Okay, don't forget, Tuesday at 8 p.m. will be the Crooked Path to Preparedness. These days and times are stressful enough, so we want you to remember to love and laugh in life while you prepare yourself for what can or will come, be it tornado or zombies. And that's 55. Now remember the call-in number again is 347-202-0228. And don't forget to press 1 to speak to me. All right, so let's go over some of the benefits of food preserving that we've discussed tonight. Here, I got a little simple list here, I think 10 items. The dehydration process minimally affects the nutritional value of foods. Vitamin A, beta-carotene, and C, carbohydrates, fiber content, potassium, magnesium, selenium, and sodium levels are not altered or lost in dehydration. Caloric values remain the same, but the fat and salt content is reduced. Dehydrated foods are free of pesticides and chemicals as long as they are grown that way. 2, herbs, flowers, vegetables, fruits, and meats can be preserved, stored, and consumed safely. 3, fresh vegetables, herbs, and fruits do not have to rot in the garden. The bounty produced by your garden or deals at the local farmer's market can be saved and enjoyed at a later date and created in smaller batches than canning. 4, stored properly, dehydrated foods have a longer shelf life than any other preservation method. Oops. Gee, man. Let's see. Okay. Sorry about that. I missed my cues on Skype. Okay, stored properly, dehydrated foods have a longer shelf life than any other preservation method. If properly sealed and left unopened, dehydrated foods can sit on your shelf, depending on the item, for between 15 and 30 years. 5, dehydrated foods save space in your pantry or cupboard because they are not stored in spoilage-prone cans, jars, or bottles, and take up much less space and weight. And, you know, I have a shed, and it's really important that I keep my weight down, so dehydrated foods are my number one commodity in there. 7, forget the processed store-bought jars of herbs and spices. Dehydrating your own fresh herbs and spices gives your favorite recipes an enhanced, potent flavor that commercially offered products are unable to deliver. And, you know, I just dehydrated some stevia, so now I'm making sugar. Dehydrators are great. 9, entire meals can be dehydrated and rehydrated by adding water, broth, or other liquids. A variety of soups made with dehydrated vegetables can ease the stress of providing a healthy meal during a busy day. You know, and I know that there's a misconception that I've been hearing around YouTube about the water temperature of rehydrating. You either have to have cold or hot. You don't. You know, the colder your water is, the slower it will rehydrate. But you don't need to put boiling water on your foods, you know, especially like fruits. I always put my fruits in cold water because I want them to come back to life slow so they come back as much as possible. And I usually just take it out of the tap or out of a bottle or jug I keep on the counter and try to take some of those chemicals out. 10, dehydrated foods are readily available to provide nutrition and sustenance during a natural disaster or hard economic times when a conventional cooking method is not readily available. And, you know, a lot of these dehydrated foods you can just eat just the way it is. You know, zucchini chips are really, really good. You know, you don't need to rehydrate everything. Just enjoy it as it is. So I see we got no one else in the queue. We're down to the last 5 minutes. And, sorry, Joe, you got no sound? Maybe DB can give you a hand there. Let's see. We got a question here from Bonnie Blue. Do dehydrated foods really last longer than freeze-dried? They do once they're opened. a dehydrated food and freeze-dried food will last about the same amount of time in a sealed can. But once you open them, that freeze-dried food goes bad a whole lot quicker than dehydrated food does. What'll happen is you'll see it. It'll start really lightening in color, and then the texture will get spongy, as if it's absorbing everything from the air. And I've got mine in mason jars, and, because you got to put it in something once you open it. And I guess if you were to take some out and reseal the Mylar bag, you could probably get your freeze-dried to last as long. But if any of you are like me, once you open it, you're ready to use it. And so you've got it in your, container ready to use. Well, sitting in that container, if you don't use it within a reasonable period of time, and some things are just really hard to use in that reasonable period of time, it will. So, yeah, and canning. Excuse me. Canning lasts a long time, too. So you got to decide which process for which item is best for you. And a lot of times that is simply just trying them and seeing what you think. Like peas, if I'm making my soups for work, I use freeze-dried peas because there's no way a pea or a green bean is going to rehydrate in enough time that it takes for me to cook my little meal. And so, you got to kind of use your judgment. Some things you're going to have to do freeze-dried. Some things you're going to want to do in a can. And sometimes you just want to do a jar. So use your best judgment on that. And remember, if you blanch, it's going to rehydrate a whole lot quicker and easier. So keep that in mind, too. You may not be able to blanch your fruits, but you can sure as heck blanch your vegetables. And that will really make it easier. So let me finish up here. William Durant once said, bankers know the history is inflationary and that money is the last thing a wise man will hoard. So, folks, let's start hoarding our dehydrated foods while you can still afford to do it. I will see you a week from this Tuesday, September 4th at 8 p.m. Central Time, when we will be talking about impending cascade in human life in an SHTF situation. So what can we expect in an SHTF situation? How can we become more prepared to increase our survivability? BexarPrepper will be joined by Pam Stegner from preparednessnow.com to talk about what we can expect as the system collapses in human loss of life and what we can do to minimize our vulnerability to be the one of many. You can find more from me on YouTube and on Facebook, also here on the first and third Tuesday of the month. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me. Good night and blessings.